Well, good afternoon, everybody. We want to thank everybody for coming. I want to start by thanking my colleagues, Sharon Bulova, who, of course, is from Fairfax County, the chair of the Board of Supervisors there, Rushern Baker, who is the county executive for Prince George's County, and Ike Leggett, who, of course, is the county executive for Montgomery County. As you probably know, we work very closely together. In fact, we just had a meeting a couple of weeks ago to continue discussions about the condition of the region and ways in which we can continue to work together. I want to thank the Council of Governments for bringing us together in this instance to look at the impacts on us of the shutdown, the federal shutdown. And they obviously uniquely and more greatly impact this region for obvious reasons, and that is we are the seat of the federal government. I think there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 800,000 employees who work for the federal government in this region, many of whom have been furloughed, and we all are feeling the impacts of that. Each of us will talk a little bit about the impacts on us. On each of us. First of all, in the District of Columbia, we've seen a drop in the areas in tourism and hospitality, which are hugely important to us because that is, along with the federal government, of course, right now is the largest employer that we have in the city with around 200,000 jobs here in the District of Columbia for federal work that are occupied by federal workers. For example, our hotel bookings for the first week of October were down by 8.3% by comparison to the comparable week of October last year. So just a year ago, we saw 8.3% higher in terms of the number of bookings in hotels, and that translates into 13,000 fewer hotel bookings in the District of Columbia. And about a $2 million loss in revenue by comparison to 2012, the same week. In terms of restaurants, we've seen a drop-off of between 7.5% and 8% by comparison to the first week of October 2012. The principal impact has been for breakfast and lunch, and I guess the reasons for that are fairly obvious. The one area, I'll say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, the one area where we've seen an increase is the alcohol tax has increased in the District of Columbia. I won't try to speculate as to why, but we've seen an increase there. And, of course, it's pretty obvious. The media have run stories about the impact on food trucks here in the District of Columbia, which in some instances have seen their business drop to nothing because they serve areas where there are federal buildings like the State Department and other places where there are virtually no workers. The other thing I would ask is that we in the District of Columbia continue to be uniquely impacted. Our budget is still considered to be part of the federal budget, unfortunately, when in fact we raise our own money. Many of you have heard me say this many times. We have a $10.1 billion budget in the District of Columbia, $6.1 billion of which is generated by the taxpayers of the District of Columbia through income taxes, through sales taxes, through property taxes, and fees that are paid by the people in the District of Columbia, the 632,000 people who live here. And then the federal money that we realize essentially comes to us in the same way the federal money goes to every other state, like Medicaid, like TANF, like federal highway dollars. There are some very small amounts of funds that we get because we are the District of Columbia, but it isn't even 1%. It's less than 1% of our budget. So, again, we have chosen, as you know, we've chosen to keep our government open. We didn't see the purpose of making a decision that anything or any person was not essential in the city. We wouldn't have put them in the budget in the first place if we had concluded that. And we now want to be able to just simply have the ability, like every other state, county, and city, in America, and that is to be able to control our own dollars and to be able to spend those dollars as they have been systematically budgeted for across the city. With that having been said, I'll ask Sharon now if she would come up. She will be followed by, I guess, Rushern, and then Ike.
Thank you very much, and let me just first say that that we all are uniquely affected by this shutdown. And for instance, the district budget is a separate budget that is impacted. Some of us in Maryland get income taxes to pay for local government. Fairfax County does not. But we also are affected by sales tax, loss of sales tax revenue, business taxes, BPOL, and but all of us, we have a commonality that we all are affected by what is happening at the federal level, and especially the inaction is killing us. The shutdown of the federal government is having a substantial effect on the entire metropolitan region, and each of our jurisdictions are feeling the impact based on our different structure and revenues. Fairfax County's economy in particular is significantly intertwined with the operations of the federal government, and while it's too early to quantify, many of the impacts here is what we know. Currently, Fairfax County's budget for the next fiscal year, 2015, is facing a projected $25 million shortfall. And we are struggling from the impact of the Great Recession, and we are experiencing a slow, tepid recovery. And I think that's the same with all of us. We're all recovering from the Great Recession, and this is not helping. Federal civilian employment is about 25,000, or about 4% of all of the jobs in Fairfax County. This means that about $150 million in income is lost each day the federal government is shut down. More than 4,000 companies in the county are federal contractors. Federal procurement contracts in fiscal year 2012 represent about $26 billion. During the 1995-1996 shutdown, 1/5 of the federal contracts were put on hold, with many employees furloughed, and many of those contractors were not reimbursed, and we are concerned about that happening again. Fairfax County is already experiencing falling revenues, in part due to the sequester and furloughs. The shutdowns have a further ripple effect on Fairfax County revenues, and some examples. Sales tax receipts in Fairfax County have decreased for 3 consecutive months, and if receipts continue to decline at this rate throughout the fiscal year, the county stands to lose in our already adopted budget $9 million or more. And we see the same trend in BPOL, business and professional occupational license taxes, and this would result in an additional $10 million loss for the county. So just from those two sources of revenue, we're talking about an impact of about $20 million. And if Congress does not avert a shutdown soon, there will be a large impact on human services agencies. After November 1st, and right now, our state and our local governments are eating through reserves in order to keep some of these programs funded. After November 1st, the Women's Infant and Children Program, or WIC, will see operations affected, directly impacting over 2,000 pregnant women, 4,000 infants, and 10,000 children. CSB will have to cease adult mental health outpatient services to over 400 people, and 255 clients would not receive help for substance use disorders. Housing vouchers to help people stay in their homes would be lost to over 3,000 households. Again, right now, our state and local governments are eating through reserves in order to keep those programs alive, and after October, we're not going to have the revenue in order to be able to do that. The bottom line is that people in business are uncertain. They're uncertain about the economy. They're uncertain about whether to invest or to hire additional workers. They're uncertain if employees will even be able to go to work the next day. Local governments across the country are in similar straits, but not as bad as the Washington metropolitan area. We are a company town, and our fate is intertwined with the federal government. The uncertainty is affecting all of us. On a positive note, I appreciate this opportunity to stand with my colleagues, Mayor Gray and County Executives Baker and Leggett, to speak about our local government concerns. This has been a great conversation, and I think that this has been a good opportunity for all of us to come together. And I would like also to thank the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, COG, for their good work in arranging for this opportunity for us to demonstrate our regional collaboration and solidarity. Thank you. Rushern?
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. I also want to thank COG for bringing us together. We normally come together in times of emergency, and this is certainly one. I also want to say from the start for us that I think my colleagues would agree with me. We support the mayor and has asked for budget autonomy. I think it is shameful that the district cannot continue to operate like Sharon is doing in Fairfax County, like Ike is doing in Montgomery County, like I'm doing in Prince George's County. We're all affected by this shutdown, but the district is uniquely affected, and I want the mayor to know that he has our support. The other thing for us in the county is 16% of our workforce work for the federal government. So a large part of our population is affected by this shutdown. That doesn't count the number of small minority businesses that do the majority of their work either with the District of Columbia or with the federal government, who now can't hire new people or have to start laying folks off because they don't know, as Sharon said, the certainty of this or when it's going to end. And so they're making decisions about revenues and about people's lives. The other thing for us is we have a close working relationship with HUD, the Federal Department of Housing and Community Development. Because as many of you know, Prince George's County was uniquely affected by the foreclosure crisis. We're just starting to come and get out of that. And now with this shutdown, it means many of our people who were working with HUD and our departments working with HUD will have to cease that until this is resolved. It means for those who were actually federal employees that had worked out situations with their mortgage companies, those things are in jeopardy because they don't know how long this will be affected. For many of them, they said they're going to get paid after the shutdown is resolved, but we don't know when that will happen. And so for us as a group, as once again, as Sharon has said, we're a company town. I often say, you know, when I talk about Prince George's County being an economic engine, we say that because of our location to the District of Columbia and the only place where they can legally print money. Well, now I have to add on to that. They can print the money, but now they can't spend it. So it doesn't help us grow our economy. We need this to end, and we've talked to our federal partners and asked them to do all they can, and we know that they are. We're lucky in the fact that we have folks like Steny Hoyer and Donna Edwards and Senator Mikulski and Cardin who are working hard, and Congressman Van Hollen from Ike's district. But we need the shutdown to end. But once again, let me emphasize as I step away how committed we are to helping the district achieve its goal. Because we need a vibrant District of Columbia for those economic development plans I have in Prince George's County to take hold. And so we want the mayor and the residents of the district to grow their economy so we can grow our economy and we can all thrive together. But this is us collectively coming together around this issue and saying to the federal government and to Congress, we need you to get back to work. Thank you. And I'll bring up my good friend from Montgomery County, County Executive Isaiah Leggett.
Thank you, Sharon. I strongly support and have for a long period of time budgetary autonomy for the District of Columbia. You've heard the impacts that it will have on the district that will spill over to the neighboring communities. Let me just paint a picture for you where we've been over the last few years. Just for example, in Montgomery County, we've eliminated 10% of our workforce. We've closed budgetary gaps of $2.7 billion. We've made extreme sacrifices over the last few years to place our financial house in order. And having done so, at a time when we thought that, at least in Montgomery County, we would see light at the end of the tunnel, the light that we see is an oncoming train by the way of sequester, by way of a budgetary shutdown, and by way of a huge debate about the debt limit. All of those things adversely affect all of our communities uniquely right now. We have in Montgomery County 70,000 federal employees that reside in Montgomery County. The potential impact of that, just on income tax receipt alone, the potential impact of that is $500,000. That's $500,000 per day. Let me repeat that. $500,000, $500,000 per day. Now, hopefully, those employees will receive the monies at some point in time in the future. But in the meantime, it has had a ripple effect on hotels, on motels, on mortgages. It has had a huge impact on the ability to go forth on a recordation and transfer taxes in Montgomery County, on the sales tax to the state of Maryland. All of those things adversely affect us now. We have an opportunity to stop the bleeding. They can act today. They need to act today. We cannot continue this because the harm that will be caused if we continue to move forward will be irreparable. And so we cannot afford to continue this challenge. Just yesterday, and it's more symbolic because it is a relatively small item, the inconsistencies that we see, the almost lunacy in some ways of how we've constructed this shutdown. We operate symbolically a small park in Montgomery County, Glen. We operate it. We pay for it, not the federal government. And so we're not asking them to spend federal dollars. They don't spend anything other than to pick up the trash and provide security on the parking lot. We will do that. But we are losing $35,000 a day for every day that park is closed, for the merchants and the vendors and the people who operate it. Many are nonprofits who would never get that money back and would obviously potentially go out of business. And we're simply saying, as the district has said, let us spend our own money. We don't want you to spend money that the federal government. Let's spend our own money here. So we go back to what I started with. The budgetary autonomy of the District of Columbia adversely affects the entire region, and they need to have that autonomy. We are uniquely positioned here to look at and understand the impacts of what is happening in our communities. And we have an opportunity for this entire matter to end. We can stop this bleeding today. We can send a very strong message to the markets, get a resolution approved, get this approved as quickly as possible, because the harm that it is causing, not only here but throughout the entire country, is something that this country cannot continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Sam.
Yes, it seems that this thing may be about to end, and my question is, if it ends, how quickly can you get going?
What do you mean by get going?
Well, in the case of D.C., obviously you've missed your Metro bill, you've missed various things like this. Obviously, you don't have employees off, but nevertheless, there are issues. How quickly can D.C. sort of get back to normal, assuming they end this thing in the next 24 hours?
I don't know. The first thing, and I think you put your finger on it, and that is to pay some of the people who have not been paid in a timely fashion because of the fact we couldn't access our own dollars. We've got Medicaid providers who have to be paid. The WMATA payment has to be made. We've got charter schools that are coming up on the 25th, and we have to be, to get ourselves prepared for that. So, on the one hand, we'll do this as quickly as we possibly can because there's so many innocent victims in this, but I can't give you a precise time or date, Sam. We'll just do it as quickly as we can.
Mr. Mayor, can we follow up on that? The question to everybody up here, given the figures that you threw out, can you recover any of this, should this end in the next 24 hours?
I don't think we'll recover some of the lost money from the hotel bookings. I don't know how we would recoup that. Again, when you talk about 13,000 bookings, that's a lot of bookings, and I see no way to recover that. When you talk about the money that's been lost from restaurants, for example, I don't see any particular way we will recover that either, Bruce. Those are taxes that probably will be lost forever to the city. I hope we can, but there's no way I can stand here in good conscience today and say that I see a path to pick up, to recover those funds.
Can we get each of the county executives to address that? Can you recover should this end in the next?
We will never recover everything, and you can't recover even for the federal contractors. Federal employees may receive back pay, but the contractors that are currently working now who are out of business, who are not working, I'm not sure that you recover that as well as the other things that have just been described.
Lost revenue is lost revenue. Lost sales taxes, lost business taxes. Arlington asked me to mention that they've seen an unprecedented number of cancellations for hotel rooms. And so our restaurants are suffering. This is something that can't be recovered. We are going to be left with a hole in all of our budgets. Of course, we'll get back on our feet again. But let me just say, one thing that concerns me, and I think all of us, and that is the uncertainty that you're hearing about from all of us. If essentially the can gets kicked down the road further and there really isn't a resolution, it's put off until February, it's put off until March, we're left in limbo. And that affects decisions that our commercial partners make, that affects decisions that our residential community makes, and it really suppresses any opportunity for us to recover from this situation. So, a lot of damage has been done. It's important that decisive action takes place to really resolve this situation.
No, I don't think we can recover from the standpoint. Same thing as County Executive Leggett said, and that is for us is the businesses that didn't hire people or let folks go. Certainly, those contracts that they were bidding on at the federal level, now they go through that process all over again. So we're not going to be able to recover from that. The other thing that was mentioned is, the sales receipts and the bookings. As the district goes down, those of us that depend on people coming to the Washington region to stay in our hotels and to eat in our restaurants, they're doing that based on what's happening in Washington, D.C. So when they see that the federal government is shut down, they assume all of D.C. is shut down, so they don't book restaurants or book hotels at National Harbor or other places in the county. And so we're losing those revenues. And it also puts us in a precarious situation as a region when we're competing to get high-tech companies to move to the Washington region. We're now seeing that, maybe it's not as sure as we thought. Maybe that means we should go to some place like California or other places where they're not so dependent on the federal government.
Mr. Baker, since you're up there, can you also answer a question in terms of estimate on how much Prince George's has been losing per day, and then also do you have any specifics in terms of hotel losses and restaurant losses?
I don't have those right offhand, but I can make sure we get those to you. We're significant in the sense that we see that the hotel bookings that we were expecting are not taking place because people are canceling their trips to the Washington region because the monuments aren't open. So National Harbor, Greenbelt are seeing a slowdown. And for us, it's the number of workers. I mean, you just take 16% of our workforce. That's a significant part is federal government, and they're now not receiving checks. So, and our contractors.
Tom?
Mr. Mayor, what was the point of today's meeting? You all know each other. You all know you've been suffering, and you got some numbers. But did you agree to do something that you haven't yet announced? Lock hands and maybe confront this majority leader of the city. Sorry, couldn't resist that.
I was going to lead a caravan down to Capitol Hill.
Is there something that you can do in a unified way other than standing here and being concerned about the losses, even as we're about to have an agreement on the Hill, or it looks like it?
I think a substantial part for us is to be able to aggregate the impact. We hadn't had a chance to do that, and you've heard that impact stated by each of us, and to help people understand what the impact of this continuing shutdown is on the entire region. Again, working with the congressional delegations, we're working with our congresswoman, they're working with their congressional delegations to try to bring this thing to a close. Beyond that, I think it's just a matter of trying to let people know how huge the impact is. And, you know, for us, it's continuing to decry the reality that we face every day, and that is the unfair treatment to not be able to access our own dollars, which is unique in the entire country.
So you won't have a resolution or a letter or a statement from today that you'll send to the delegation?
Not at this point.
Nothing formal like that?
The term was used seemingly over. You know, I go by Yogi Berra. It's not over until it's over. And as Sharon stated a moment ago, over means delay to a couple of months down the road. We continue to suffer the after effects of just simply delay. One of the messages that we need to convey, and I hope that we're conveying it well here, is that we need to stop this type of operation in terms of how government operates overall. This is not in our local or our national interest. So that's a strong message we need to send here. The next message is to let the region know that, and the Congress know, that we are solidly behind the District of Columbia in terms of its autonomy as well.
Mr. Leggett?
You know,
I'm sorry, sir.
I'm sorry.
Are your plans on track to reopen Glen Park?
Yes, we plan to do so. And so if we don't get a resolution, we plan to go in. Maybe it's simply an act of civil disobedience. But we plan to do it. Again, this weekend. Keep in mind what I'm talking about here. We operate this through our partnership. So the federal government is not paying for this. The operators are doing so. And so I see this as an exception on top of an exception. And we need to drive that message home.
let me just do this, if I can. Somebody asked a question about the impact in terms of dollars. For Prince George's County, you're in loss of income tax during the shutdown. It's about $270,000 that we see a day that we are losing. Approximately $14 billion federal spending annually in the county. So as you can see, it has a tremendous impact on us in the county with this shutdown. The other thing is the question was asked about us meeting today and what what comes out of this. One, other than the fact that we're all sympathetic to each other in our plight and that we all support the district's budget autonomy. The other thing is going forward. This is telling us we no longer want to be in a reactive mode. This is how can we be proactive. One is certainly the district's autonomy, but the other is to talk to our federal partners and say, you know what, we don't want to have to go through this again. What will keep us from having this shutdown? How can we play a role, given the population that we serve, to make sure this does not happen, and talk to our federal partners? And so this is an emergency that we'll be not only debriefing from, but coming up with a strategy how we move forward.
Can you hold on 1 second?
I was just going to comment on our coming together, and it is significant that all four of us are together. It could have been more. There were more jurisdictions that would have liked to have been here with us. We were trying to keep it to the big four, and the Council of Governments. All of the local governments within the Washington metropolitan region have also signed on to a letter to members of Congress, also expressing similar concerns. And lastly, I would just like to say, we compete with each other. Sometimes, we're fussing with each other over different things. But when it comes down to things we care about, and when it comes down to the commonality among us, we are together. And I think that that is significant, and I think you're going to see more of that.
Do you still want the FBI?
That's one of the things we compete about.
The FBI. You see how close we are?
It's already been ceded over to the District of Columbia.
Mr. Mayor, can we
Wait a minute.
Mayor Gray, looking at D.C. traffic the last 2 weeks, and I'm surprised that 10 years ago would be a different story. We're seeing a lot of private sector activity. The city still has traffic, almost as much as before the shutdown. Last week we had 50,000 delegates from the World Bank, IMF, representing 120-plus countries, about $2 trillion worth of investment capital. At this moment, we're speaking, we have the GM, CEO of General Motors, Federal Express, and Federal Express and Waste Management right around the corner. Washington is a different story now, and the federal government is now seeming to play a small part in our economy. And, you know, we're seeing booming in Ward 8, Ward 5, companies moving in, and also Prince George's. So should the federal government, I mean, what's the role in the federal government now? You know, this is going back to the economy. We're more private sector than the federal government.
Well, there's no question that the federal government continues to play a huge role in the economy of the city. And if you go back and look at our 5-year economic development plan for the District of Columbia, one of the things that we said at the time was that we recognize that there's increasing uncertainty in the federal presence, you know, with sequestration, with the shrinking number of jobs, with the, you know, movement of jobs to other areas of the nation, that we didn't think we could depend over the long run on the federal government's presence in the way we have in the past. And frankly, that unfortunately has proven to be true, especially when you look at this situation. So we've created, I was just saying to my colleagues here in the meeting, that we've created almost 25,000 private sector jobs in the District of Columbia. But our unemployment is starting to creep back up again, and when you look at the reasons for it, it largely is almost solely the reason for it is the loss of federal jobs in the city. That has substantially mitigated the increase that we've seen in the private sector jobs. So, yeah, I mean, to be able to make an observation that it appears that the private sector has an increased presence, that is good news to us, because that's what we wanted to have happen, and it's obvious now we need to do more of that.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask just each of you to comment on the process as it's played out on Capitol Hill? We're on day 16 of the shutdown. It started off with Republicans on the Hill wanting to defund the health care reform law. The proposal that's going to go to the floor today really makes none but only marginal change in the health care law and basically kicks the can down the road to January, February, and tries to get the Congress to write a budget, which everyone recognizes something should have done long ago. Can you just comment on this process that, you know, that this has had such
What process?
that it's had such ancillary impacts and serious impacts on your jurisdiction?
I mean, I think
had to watch this from
I think we've had something like 32 plans already. Each half day, there's been a new approach. I think, frankly, this has sent such a poor message to our own nation and to the world in terms of how our nation is doing business at this stage. You know, I feel it. You know, my colleagues feel it uniquely. You know, every day because we are right here. But for those people who are not near to the District of Columbia, to Washington, D.C., and those who are in other nations, what must they think of the United States of America at this stage? I heard, you know, some commentary from China and other places that people are just shaking their head. Is this the same United States of America that we have known for decades and centuries? Because it just doesn't seem the same. And when you look at what the purported purpose to me of this was, it seems like a whole lot of ado about nothing at the end of the day.
No, you're absolutely.
Let me add two factors. One of which it creates a level of uncertainty, and that's ongoing, the process, whatever it is called. Secondly, I think the point was made a few minutes ago about the presence of the federal government. It is reduced from what it was, say, 10 years ago, but make no mistake about it. The federal government is a very large presence in this region, and it will be for a significant period of time, even though it is less than what it was some years ago. There are 70,000 residents in Montgomery County who work directly for the federal government. And when you multiply all of those who either benefit, contract with, you're still talking about a fairly large number. That is still the largest employer in this region, although its footprint is somewhat smaller than it was before.
Last question.
No, I would just to
response, last question.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the federal government's role, yeah, the even in Prince George's County, as we grow what we call our private sector, a lot of that is based off the relationship with the federal government. So as we're getting private contractors to come to the county, it's based off work either with Joint Base Andrews or with the federal government downtown. So it is a very important factor in employment in the county, and I'm sure it's the same way in the District of Columbia. And so to have a shutdown that is basically caused over a policy that was passed by Congress and approved and went through the Supreme Court over health care. So this is self-induced. That's the thing that gets all of us as we look around here. It's like, well, we didn't have to have this. We didn't have to go through this process. It's self-induced, and so for us, we're scratching our heads, just like businesses. I was telling my colleagues, a number of private sector businesses have come to us in the county and said, "Well, do you have a rainy day fund for us? While we're waiting to get our money, do you have a fund where you can actually give us money?" That was a legitimate question, and we just said, "No, we don't."
Is it not a fact, though, that other than complain and bring this to the attention of your constituents, there isn't much you can do about this, right?
I think the thing that we have to do, and why we're holding this press conference, is to show that our federal partners that we're serious about this, that we're going to take this step. As Sharon said, there were many more who could have come here and stood with us who were impacted. But the numbers and the population you see around standing here says, we're going to see, what we can do in the future to prevent things like this happening over a simple policy that has already been passed by Congress and gone up to the Supreme Court. How do we prevent that from happening? How do we say to our colleagues? The other thing I just thought about as you were saying that is, we have friends throughout the nation who send representatives to Washington. So part of our charge, and Ike is the president of the County Executives of America, is part of us is talk to those county executives in other parts and say, this is what your representatives are doing and the impact they're having on us, and we need you to band together with us.
If I can also. I think the important thing is that what is happening in Congress is just irresponsible. And I think the best thing that all of us can do and have done today is to demonstrate the real impact of what's going on, what the impact is on local governments, what the impact is on real people who are living here in the metropolitan Washington area. This is not responsible, and it needs to end, and it needs to end not just in the short term, but there needs to be a resolution in the long term as well.
We'll take one last question right there.
How much money is left in the contingency plan, and when will it run out?
In the district's well, Mr. Sherwood has already reported on that, so why don't you just ask him? He didn't ask me, I might add. So I appreciate you asking me. Okay.
I did ask.
Yeah. Well, we made payroll yesterday. We have a $100 million payroll. And what's left is somewhere between $30 and $35 million in that specific fund. I think, as everybody knows, we've been working now for days to try to figure out if we can move some of the district's dollars, because we have a $1.5 billion fund, at least we did when this started, to see if we can move other funds into the contingency cash reserve and be able to use them to keep us, continue to operate as we've indicated we would. That process is still going on. We don't have final approval on that. That involves the chief financial officer and involves the office of the attorney general as well. We're just trying to figure out. I mean, this is uncharted territory, Mike, and we're continuing to try to make sure that in doing this, we don't make the story become that we did something that was inappropriate. We want to make sure that we're doing that. And we knew we could make it to this day. We do have, as I've indicated earlier, there are, people who haven't been paid. Our Medicaid providers still yet to be paid. The other thing I should mention, too, is remember that a lot of our contractors, they wouldn't be billing for October until the first week in November anyway. So they wouldn't be affected, unless and until we get to that point. So, no, it's not a great situation by any stretch to be in. On the other hand, I'm glad that we've had the reserve fund that we've had, $1.5 billion fund. It helps to make the case as to why it's important to be able to have that kind of rainy day fund, that reserve fund to be able to fall back on, because otherwise we could have been shut down and furloughing people. One of the things, and I'll end with this, but one of my concerns is people to lose confidence in this nation. I was out on the street the other day, and a lady was in the car, and she stopped and she said, "Hey, Mayor Gray, can you get us back to work?" I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "What agency do you work for? Because we didn't shut down any agencies." And she said, I work for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I said, I wish I could get the federal government back to work because that is one of the deepest concerns that we have at this point. Thank you all very much.
How much do the liquor